Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Ooh, there's a lot going on with Otto Stormer and his Mandelson. I mean, it's quite ridiculous, isn't it, when you think about it, that this pretends that they didn't know. Of course they knew, that's why they put him there. It's just so absurd that people... Well, it would appear people are not actually buying it anymore. But they seem to be thinking that if we get rid of Stormer... all will be well. Well, it won't. It doesn't matter which Johnny come lately again, and nothing's going to change. The agenda will continue. It does look like the old Israel's having a bit of a wake-up call in the sense that the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics, when Israel came on, they got booed, which is jolly good because, you know, how they think they can get away with genocide like they are. Well, fibbing still about this pretend 6 million Holocaust malarkey, which of course they have to do because it's in the Talmud that 6 million of their own have to die before the Mashiach comes. So they've been inventing this 6 million idea forever. I mean, that wasn't the first event with it. They did it in the 1800s, just to keep the people that believe that they're better than everybody else on side and that their Mashiach's coming soon to a cinema near you, kind of thing. So it's quite ridiculous, but good. It shows that people are really not accepting this rubbish. But, you know, the blag is just so clever. And as I said last week, you know, we in the West, we natives, we have a serious problem because we have two groups shoving the shit everywhere. But there might be two groups, but they're actually one body. And that would be Islam and Judaism, or Rabbinical Judaism, let's say, because they are one and the same. Islam was created by them, the Carthaginians, in North Africa, and then repicked up again, solidified, with all the machinations around Morocco, especially in the early 20th century. And the Shriners. I mean, but it goes beyond that, and it was the Crusade times, you know. Morocco became a centre for pilgrimage for Muslims because they couldn't get to Mecca. And it's so convoluted that people are really not getting it. But once people start to recognise that you're right not to like the system called Islam because it's a lesser idea of how to be man than the one that we sort of inherited. I mean, we've wrecked it, let's be honest, and it's been being wrecked for centuries, but it's still our inheritance, spiritual and temporal. It's about time we started to wake up to it. But we need to recognise that, you know, following Tommy, who doesn't know his own name, is only playing into the game because it's just one front in the other. And it's quite ridiculous. Some people might go, no, you've got to listen to those that are preaching the true version of what the Quran teaches, especially when they're mixing up the hadith. It's the same rhetoric. They're better, bigger, greater. Their God says they're going to take over the whole world and rule it, and it's going to come into every home. Is it? And it'll come into every home, and they're saying, doesn't matter what you lot think now, your kids are going to be Muslim. It's the same rhetoric, because it's the same theology, just slightly different. I mean, there's more Talmud in Islam than you'll ever find in the Old Testament. You won't find it. And it's time now we're starting to wake up to that. You've got Charles there pulling it in, because of course he's the son of a trustee, the Rothschilds. He's no choice, just like his mother had no choice. And like all monarchs since Victoria have all been operating under the Rothschilds, because of course they sired them all. And that's right across Europe. It's rather sad, really. The only rebellious side of it all, back in those days, was coming out of Russia. And that was thwarted when Alexander I told the Rothschilds, no, you're not having a new world order, because they wanted the world government then, and broke it up, stopped it, and which, of course, they promised to pay him back, which they did with the Bolshevik Revolution. And you see a lot of stuff on the internet these days where people are really believing that Putin is actually something separate from it, but actually, he's just a big part of the same. There's no difference in him. He's just, his rhetoric is more in tune with what people will accept and know to be going on. And it really is a minefield. And now, of course, you've got this huge diversion again raising its head, and people think that they're getting somewhere. But actually, this whole Epstein malarkey, there are some interesting things coming out, but also you've got to remember, can we trust images these days? Can we trust video, given AI's capacity to mould it together? It's even more difficult now. It's not like a Photoshop, whereas you could always pick out the Photoshop stuff if you had the eye. Whereas now, AI's forming it, and it's even worse. And you've got to be really careful with that stuff. You've got to be exceptionally careful. But, people are really not, in my opinion, seeing it correctly. It's like people are still focused to, they're all filthy, they're all paedophile. Exactly what Putin's saying. So he's giving the script to make you think he's fantastic. And people are focused to that. Oh, they're all filthy, they're disgusting. We are realising that actually what you're actually doing here is helping these Second Temple priesthood destroy Western civilization. You're undermining your own power structures. It's already been undermined through incorporation. They're all private for-profit corporations now. De facto, they're not de jure as we'd expect, but most people, especially the baby boomer generation, still believe that the English realm exists because they didn't pay attention to the coronation oath. And that's why they're in that sort of dichotomy. It's ignorance that's running this show. It's quite ridiculous, in truth. But it's just another massive diversion, this Epstein rebrand. Okay, there's a lot more stuff coming out, but like I said, you really have to be careful. You can't trust images or videos these days. And of course, people can say, well, that's perfect, isn't it? Well, yeah, I get that as well. But it is a diversion. You've got to focus to what's going on in your own country, in your own nation, with your own power structures. I mean, Trump is just, he's so putting in this fascist state now with this ICE group. It's quite ridiculous. They're doing it here, but it's in a different method, whereas they're bigging themselves up. Police are like reporting, bigging themselves up all the time on Facebook, and, oh, we have this to say, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, okay, do your fucking job, because that's what your job is. You don't have to keep telling us about it. When the police were operating in service of law, when they were constables, you very rarely saw them. They very rarely said anything about the business and what they were doing. If it were important, it'd be on the TV or the radio, etc. You wouldn't get them bigging themselves up. Because they work within the strict structures then. Because if they didn't, then on public opinion, they had to keep the public on side. Now, they're complete contrary to that. The people that are the police have no idea, because they've lowered the IQ over 30 years to the point that they don't know their ass from their elbow. But they're completely and utterly in opposition to the role of a constable and operating only on policy. They're there to create contract with the person. That's it. They're not enforcing law. They're not servicing law. They're creating contract and then binding you by it and then enforcing the rules of that contract. They're not doing your job. The military commanders bigging it up. We must this, blah, 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 conscription. What are you for, if not to protect the nation? Well, of course, there is no nation anymore, and that's the subject matter of tonight's live stream. There is no nation called the United Kingdom. It is not a nation. And so you've got Greg Hallett running around giving it the big King of the UK, 2 kings. And it's like, for fuck's sake, Greg, are you really that stupid? Are you really that stupid? King of the UK. The UK is a fucking corporate. It's an incorporated state system. And we're going to get into that. It's not a nation. England's a nation. Scotland's a nation. Ireland's a nation. Wales isn't even a nation. It was always part of England. It's always been run by the same parliament that runs England, which is Westminster, which is a sovereign state again. England doesn't actually have a parliament. Scotland does. Wales has an assembly, but what that's got to do with anything, I don't know. It's like Wales is mainly sheep. So I don't see any sheep in that assembly. So the sheep have been cast aside. Nobody's representing the sheep. But it really is an absolute nonsense that this idea of the UK is a nation and that you can be a king of it. I mean, you've got a fraud claiming that as it is. But there has been an interesting development. I mean, we did a live stream a few years ago on the proposed dismantling of the Church of England. If you were paying attention at the coronation oath, this fella didn't swear an oath to uphold the Church of England. He swore to uphold the Church of Scotland. And if that's not a big red flag for people that are awakened, but bypasses the numpties, I don't know what is. But on the 4th of February, my born day, this month, he did in fact meet with the Archbishop. Now let me see if I can get that up. I don't think I actually put it up, so I need to just find this. This is interesting. I'll just run through this while we're at it, because again, this is interesting. But this is an email that apparently has come out through this last raft of exposure on the Epstein gig. And it's a conversation between Epstein and Ariana Rothschild. 31st of December 2018. And it says, great, did you get my video with the girls? And then Ariana Rothschild says, I'll be there 2030. Monday the 31st, 2008, 9:35 a.m. I know it's true, but regularly used to say that Rothschilds planned and supported Hitler in mass destruction to gain more power. I'm in the Maldives, also with a cold since yesterday. I've been diving a lot, 3 to 4 a day, and back in Europe on the 3rd. Ariana Rothschild. First, it turns out to be 100% true. Hitler was selling his clothes and artwork and living in a shelter funded by Jews. Epstein, Rothschilds, and Gutmann, no conspiracy. The Epsteins were the Vienna bankers, bought the bank on the ring, hence still Palais Epstein. Where are you? I'm in bed with your cold. Whether it's a way to say that generosity is not rewarded or that the conspiracy theory still exists is quite pathetic. And Ariane wrote, I thought you'd find amusing in a Harvard class on Hitler. They told the story of when he was so poor he lived in a shelter for the homeless and destitute. That had been financed by the 3 wealthy families, the Gutmanns, the Epsteins, and the Rothschilds. It turns out to be accurate. And then there's a please note the information contained in this communication is confidential and may be attorney-client privileged. May constitute inside information and is intended only for the use of the addressee. It is the property of JEE. Unauthorised use, disclosure, copying of this communication or any part thereof is strictly prohibited and may be unlawful. If you have received this communication in error, please notify us immediately by return email or by blah, 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 blah. And then it says, destroy this communication and all copies thereof, including all attachments, copyright, all rights reserved. Well, unfortunately, that didn't take place. Now, just let me see if I can find this, because I actually forgot to put this up. But What were we talking about? Ah, of course, the Church of England. Now, because this is I'm trying to work it out what this would actually mean, because where the hell have I put it? There we go. Right, so I've picked this up this week. Well, yesterday, I think. So it says, today, February the 4th, 226, ancient King Charles III met with the new Archbishop of Canterbury, of Flossie, Dame Sally Moolally, at Buckingham Palace, where she made the oath of allegiance to the sovereign. So, that being the case then, the Church of England is now under oath to it. A blank screen. No, it's not a blank screen. I've got it up here. I think it might have been earlier, Jeff, yeah. Right. The oath acknowledged the king as the supreme governor of the Church of England in a traditional ceremony dating back to the reign of Elizabeth I. Dame Sarah is the first female Archbishop of Canterbury in the church's history. That looks like a fella to me, or one ugly Flossie. So it probably just is a fella. You know, they're just twisting it up. He's in Clitheroe tomorrow, by the way. Everybody's getting excited. Lord Clitheroe's just died. Everybody loves him because he was lovely and he looked after Downham, which is, of course, where Queen Elizabeth spent a lot of time. I know that for a fact because I kept getting calls off the detectives here saying, "What are you up to? What are you doing?" Well, I'm thinking, well, I'm not doing anything. I didn't even know she was coming. But you keep telling me she's coming up. So he's died, and then you look at him, he were at Rio Tinto Zinc. He were in every piece of shit order crap you can imagine. But he had a nice smile, and people thought he were amazing and fantastic. So I don't know what to make of that right now, because it's only just been picked up. But she's an oath of allegiance to the sovereign instead of... So let's look at it. It's a turnaround, isn't it? It's a complete reversion. Whereas the church stood on its own as a sovereign entity under God. And now all of a sudden, she, on behalf of the church, has made an oath of allegiance to this Johnny-come-lately, a liege lord. He's not a sovereign. He's a liege lord. So it is a total inversion. So now this dismantling of the Church of England is directly in the hands of Charles III. So Charles III, as we looked at last week, is responsible, as was his mother, for importing these two foreign entities, i.e. Rabbinical Judaism and Islam, and now he's been put in charge of the proposed idea of destroying the Church of England. So, you know, if you've awakened and you can see that now, there is no room for error. That is a fact, and that is exactly what's happening. That's a hell of a ring he's got on his little pinky. It's a bit of an odd one, that. I'd like to see what it actually has on it. So, anyway. So that's that. Excuse me. So that is interesting. That now it's a complete inversion, and the Church of England is subservient to the will of that fella. Not the other way around. Is that a good thing? Is it heck? How could it possibly be a good thing? You know, it's not. It's ridiculous. So that's that. What else did I have? Let's have a look. So looking at what we've just looked at with Hitler, that was right. We have looked at other sort of rhetoric from George Patton. But this is a letter to his wife, which was July 21st, 1945. And he said to her, "Berlin gave me the blues. We have destroyed what could have been a good race, and we are about to replace them with Mongolian savages. And all Europe will be communist. It is said that for the first week after they took it, Berlin, all women who ran were shot, and those who did not were raped. I could have taken it instead of the Soviets, had I been allowed." General George Patton again. So, of course, they're not going to let that happen because Hitler was a Soviet. He was a Bolshevik agent. And the whole game of the Second World War was to allow the Bolsheviks to expand the game across Europe. The Berlin Wall. It took half of Europe away from Europeans and destroyed it, basically. A lot of the Slavs, the Germans. It wasn't a good thing. So, it makes it even more important to recognize that Hitler was no genius, no rebel. He was just doing the same kind of thing as Trump is, pretending to be a rebel, just so they can completely take over the nation, shut it down under martial law, and move it in whichever direction they wish. And of course, like then, the reason they have for that today is because they want to take everybody to war. Trump's putting the fleets into the Med. It's all Iran. That's what they're heading for. Putin, as I've said before, he was there to just remove the Ukrainians from the Khazarian homeland. But at the same time, he militarizing his nation, getting his soldiers war ready. They created their own private military force, mercenary force, which did most of the fighting, like they always do. Here we had Blackwater, which has been formed since 9/11. A huge, huge private mercenary force run by an ultra-Zionist Christian. Yep, we know his name. It's not called Blackwater now, but I think you all know what we're talking about. So it's all been about getting war going and then enticing all the best of the best in all nations to go and join this private mercenary force and make lots of cash. So we paid them, trained them, and off they went. That tells you what kind of characters they really were. And that's been going on since 2011. Russia's now created its own. They are now ready. They've got the new Hessian, and they've got the new Hessian base from all nations in private security, all operating for guess who? Guess who? Who are they guarding? Guess who? It's quite ridiculous, really, but that is the situation. All getting ready for one more war, and the kicker is going to be Iran. You've now got Milikowski shouting his mouth off everywhere, warning the West again how they have to obey his cries for the preventing of anti-Semitic nonsense. Well, there's nothing anti-Semitic about calling out the controllers of Israel because they aren't Semitic. They do not speak the language. They speak Yiddish, which is not a Semitic language. It's a language that was formed in Germany by the pogrom Jews in Russia. It's the language they created themselves. It's nothing to do with Semitism. The Ashkenazi have nothing to do with the Middle East, save for the fact that, like in the Second Temple days, it was the Persian Empire putting its might into what is the pivotal trade between Africa, Asia, and Europe. The Levant. Same thing now. It's no different. The empire pushing itself in there, but also it's a fire starter in order to get the Western nations to go and fight this war. Well, we don't need to go and fight any wars outside of our own nations. The fight's here on Blighty. The fight's inside America. It's inside Europe. That's where the next war is. But if they can get you guys to conscript or join, and then they can move you overseas, what an easy run they have, these cultures that are coming in, because they're just fighting women. They do seem to like that. Fighting women, little girls, and young kiddies. You really have to start seeing war as a strategy, not thinking like a soldier, waiting to be told what to do, and then carry out what you've rehearsed and practiced. It's not the game. This is war that's coming. And it's being perpetrated by one force that controls everything. And it controls it because of money. We've all sucked it up. We've all entered into it. We've all been using it. We've took our eyes off the ball. And here we go. But really, right now, at this particular point in time, it's essential that people stop seeing Islam and Rabbinical Judaism as two separate entities. They are the same. and the same forces control both from the top. And it's one agenda. It's just a front force first. And that is the way it is. And until you start to see that, these rabbinical Jews at the top, who have nothing to do with the Torah, by the way, so they're not Jews in the sense that we would understand them. They have no connection to the Torah whatsoever, save for the fact that they've been controlling it since the Second Temple, based in what they claim to be the oral law given by Moses, today known as the Talmud. And I watched Ben Shapiro get laced, a guy, because they keep using this Judo-Christian phrase, don't they, all the time. And one young chap stood up and made it very clear that actually it's a misnomer, an oxymoron, because of course there's no such thing as Judeo-Christianity, because Judaism as a rabbinical system based in the Talmud despises everything about it. And he went through quite a few phrases within the Talmud, and Shapiro, all he had to say was, that's a bad reading of the Talmud. Well, it's not. That's reading it verbatim, the way that he presented it. So they're really on the back foot now, and I can understand why they're striking. And so be it, because you can't let this you cannot let these people get away with it just because they claim to represent particular branches of theology. They don't. They're way outside of it. But because of the money, because of the emotional empathy they've managed to create unto themselves, that is up until their genocide in Palestine, which is making people realise actually that these people that everybody's held empathy for, and to the point where they've just pulled in money like you wouldn't believe and built this system that we're now all facing, is starting to fall apart, which is good. It can only be good. The truth will out, and this is the truth coming out. And it is, I've listened to quite a lot of people I considered reasonable Jewish people, like, what's that flossy called that used to be on telly a lot? Roseanne Barr. She always appeared to me to be quite balanced in her take, understanding that Jews are a big part of this, but then there's a separation between your run-of-the-mill Jews and then this political system of Zionism. But even now, when you listen to them, you can tell that what I've said before is that they keep quiet, as Rabbi Finkelstein hinted at when he said that they all know what's actually going on, just in case. And now I can see that plain as day in these people that I once thought were quite balanced, because they have been sat there just in case. And now they're starting to realise that actually this is an exceptionally dangerous time, because the whole world is starting to see the reality of the situation. Not because we want to just decry and spit. We are watching what's going on right now, and has been since, 2 years? Over there in the Middle East. You can't get past that. The rhetoric that comes from these people that are interviewed on that very subject matter, it's diabolical, but it's what people need to see. It's what people need to see, because they do control the money, and therefore they do control nations. They have the back doors through tech in every single infrastructure in all nations that use computers now. Everything's online. All our databases are online, no longer paper. Your energy grids are all being worked through computer systems. Your military networks all being run on computers. And they have the back doors. So when Milikowski says you better pay attention and heed his warning, it's because that's the power they have. And again, back to Epstein, it's important that people stop just, how disgusting these people are. These people are your politicians, they're your business leaders. And every time you decry that behaviour, you are forcing them further into the hands of this network that's blackmailing them. This is what these networks were set up. Savile, Epstein is just Maxwell's network. These are the networks of blackmail. And this is how they're controlling everybody. Trump included. In fact, Trump especially. Especially Trump. However, the fact that they're releasing this stuff today, it sounds that there's two options. You've either got, they're that far gone now with this, they just don't believe that they can fail, or Trump may not be happy carrying out a lot of the stuff that he's being forced to do off this blackmail. Because it's not doing him any good. There's a lot of stuff coming out now of all these so-called Republican senators who've, for the last 4 years, while you had this pretend Biden in office, were always pulling him apart very well, calmly, etc. Now coming out on these Epstein files is also attracted to prepubescent flea bags. They're all controlled because of this blackmail network. And while you just focus on what Putin's narrative is, that he's giving you, all your leaders are sick and puke and you need to let him in to get rid of them, you're not seeing the real game. If you want your politics back, we need to form an amnesty as a real, lawful thing whereby these blackmailed politicians and business leaders and lords and ladies, if they are also blackmailed, they will come forward. Because if they don't come forward, then they go to jail and they don't come out. But we need to offer them that method to come forward and give up the controllers, those entities that are actually forcing them to the will of this system. And we can arrest all these people and scoop them up in one go. But the most important part of that is we get our politics back. And Whitehall is by far the biggest means of our politics being completely controlled. We don't even know half of these people in Whitehall. In fact, 3/4 of these people, we don't know who these people are. My guess is they're full-blown Bolsheviks. And since they got rid of the colleges that always trained our civil service, common purpose has been in play and such. They're all program people. And they're the ones running government. And they don't get voted in or out. They're not elected. It doesn't matter how many prime ministers you have in. It's that side of things. The electoral colleges, once they started to demolish electoral colleges in the 90s with Blair, it's outrageous. There's stuff coming out about Blair now also, about conversations where it's pretty clear that Blair was fully controlled by this intelligence operation. And the money that we all thought he would get in for himself, it were being dispersed to his handlers as well. So they were all making a lot of money. And interestingly, in one of those communications, Blair was sent to Kazakhstan to actually advise the leaders of Kazakhstan, which we now know also, it would appear, is where they intend to move the new financial system. Not only the new financial system, but also the religious system, which we know is under this Noahide system is going to be the Sanhedrin. So when you look at 2030 agenda, that is Noahide. When you look at this morals thing they keep preaching everywhere while slaughtering people and children in the Middle East, because of course that moral standard that they're looking at is for you, and you only Gentile, non-Jews, then it's, again, all Noahide. So everything we see and call New World Order, if people could start to recognize that actually what that is this is what the Noahide system actually is. Complete control of all non-rabbinical Jews, the Gentiles, the Goy, who in their eyes are there to serve them and them alone. And it's because, in education, which we took over by the Carnegies and Rockefellers, at the late 1800s, your libraries, etc., we have been educated to get a job, climb a ladder, and from the age of 7, their kids are taught to own the ladder, to own the company that you're trying to get a job with and climb the ladder. It's the only difference between them and us that gives them the advantage. It's all about the programming that's given to you through your religion and also through education. It fixes your mind to see things in a certain way. That is the only advantage they have. They're not super fantastically amazing. They're just taught different. And when you start to recognize that, you can start to see through this facade that somehow they are chosen by the Creator. No, they're not. They have a God that's in opposition to the Creator and the creative force, and that is how it achieves it. And it's been holding that knowledge since Babylon, and it only dishes it out to its servants. And that's pretty much basically where we're at. And the bloodlines get into this in that sense, because if you're breeding with the same, then those genetic memories and such are already active. It's very easy for the offspring born into those avatars to carry it forward. This is why we have obsessions with bloodline. But it works to the other side as well. You know, the higher evolved lines, which is the white race, and it always has been, because we tie into the elven, all the fairy, for all that side that we understand as mythos. That's where we came from and come in. We've been debauched. We've allowed ourselves to be debauched. Make no mistake about it. I'm not sat here blaming any other. You know, they're free to choose what they want to do. You're free to choose what you want to do. And it's when people start to enforce their own will on others that we get this problem. But the main issue with all this, and what people fail to recognize, is this world has been created by everybody, because it's that projection outside yourself onto this screen that creates the matrix, the world. And as Yeshua made clear, if you're not seeking the kingdom within, you're projecting onto the projector. You've created it. You're keeping it going. You're feeding it. And then, of course, you've got these groups within that matrix that have worked out how to manipulate it to their own advantage. That is the situation we're in, ladies and gentlemen. And like you go through these ages, it's happened so many different times. It has to run its course. It has to play itself out. How else are people going to learn? And Plato gave us the symbolism way back in the day in the cave analogy. You know, we're looking at the shadows on the wall. You're looking at a projector. Turn around and look at the fucking fire. And turning around means look within. Because you are already in the image of the Creator. You are a man. But in this projection, it's been going on for so long, they now class you as a human, a shade of man. And this is where we're at. So it's not all one group's fault. This is what man in his entirety for aeons has been forming by giving energy to the theatre, the projector on the screen. And that's what everybody's chasing. Shakespeare gave it you. It's in all the esoteric stuff. It's there for you to see if you would only pay attention and train your subconscious to grasp symbolism and apply critical thought to what you're reading, rather than allowing the program to edit what you're reading because it fits in with what they told you it means. And we've been through all this stuff. Hopefully it's helped, and it continues to help people understand our situation. Because when you start to look at it like that, people that have chosen to be insane are going to be insane. You preaching to them is a waste of time. You've got to start to focus to where you're at, what you're doing, what's the image you have for your future, your family, your friends, people that matter, people that are trying to better themselves. They're not sat there loving the fact that they want to enslave other people. They want to conquer other people. That's fear and cowardice, because they want what they can't have but they can get it if they can create a situation where they can force it. And that isn't just tied to one race, one religion. It's in everything. Because it's a character trait within man. And unfortunately, these times that we're living through today, that's the projection. That is the main projection that everybody all over the world is thrusting out there into La La Land. And La La Land is coming to bite. So, I will have a look who's joined us, and then we'll get stuck into this. The United Kingdom is not a nation. Because until people start to recognise that you cannot hold hope in this monarch to put things right, because he is the prime example and focus point to everything that's wrong, as was his mother and all the monarchs before them, with perhaps the exception of the one that abdicated. He didn't want to play the game. But at that point, we could see that actually the monarch had no power because he was forced out. And they created this fantasy around marrying an American divorcee as reasoning. And people allowed it, fell for it, went for it. Because they were thinking wrong. So you're not going to get anything in relation to de jure by following this nonsense. And it is a nonsense. The sovereignty lies with the people. But we're talking people pre-1688. You've got to understand that, okay, there is some value to the Bill of Rights, Act of Settlement, etc. But ultimately, that has been the kicker in relation to removing us from common law properly. And it's the time and the point that the moneylenders, via the Scottish Whigs, the Presbyterians, finally took full control, not only of the monarchy system, but also Parliament and the Lords. But having said that, the bishops in the Church of England managed to keep things at bay until Blair pretty much got rid of a lot of them into the 90s and then beyond. So the saving grace, which was the Church of England and its bishops, is long gone. And that is a sad state of affairs. Now, who's joined us? And then we'll crack on with the document. Kerry says, hello from Ireland, evening Kerry. Or Sam. Anthony says, evening Sean, friends, fellow seekers of style and wisdom, evening Anthony. John says, hello, evening John. Upward says, evening Sean and all, hope you're well. I'm very well, hope you're well. Paul says, evening Sean, mods, chat and viewers, evening to you all. Evening Paul. The frame is coming off tomorrow. Oh, you get your leg back. Well done, that man. Not forgetting to thumbs up, hit the button. Yeah, get that button hit. It gives them something to take off after. Paul says, good evening Sean and everyone, evening Paula. Jerry, it's evening Sean and all inmates, evening Jerry. Mr. Jim Drinks, he says, hello Sean and everyone in the mix. Hello to you, James. France Booton. Good evening Sean, how are you? I'm very well, thank you sir. Or lady. Evening and welcome. CW Poe, she's on, she's back. Is the Janie. Evening, Jane. Sorry, Eve. Sean, evening chat. Can't see that. Janie 55's evening, Sean, David, mods and chatters. Evening, Jane. Evening, one and all. Hope you're all right, Sean. 22 teen again. I was 22 teen on the 4th. Yes, I was. Finally reached 22 teen. It's been a long gig, but I'll be 22 teen again next year. You've got to keep telling your body it's 22 teen, and then it thinks, oh, we better crack on. And I have been interested now. All you older guys, they're getting them into this. So, and it fucking works. So much so, I have to temper it. Right, so if you want natural testosterone, okay, and I'm nearly 2 weeks in on this now, and I can tell you now, fucking hell, does it work, right? It's serious stuff. If you want to feel like you're 20 again, this is all you need to do. Forget all your fancy shit that they're all on, all these bodybuilders that shrinks the balls. This makes them bigger. So, Tongat Ali. And hang on, this bloody microphone. Where are we? Fedoria agrestis. Fadogia agrestis. Let me try and get that out of that light. One each of those in a day, and I do zinc every now and again as well. Just to give it a boost. Wow. But you do, I have to say, you do have to temper it because, yeah, you're a bit sharper on everything, a bit quicker to, that kind of thing. But honestly, 2 weeks in, and it's amazing stuff. So if you're feeling a bit like head to low, but get some of that down your neck, and that'll tell your body you're 22 teen again. Never mind having to tell yourself. So that would be, I like it. It's good stuff. You just go, like I say, you have to temper it because you don't necessarily sort of recognise, but then every now and again you think, oh, we're a bit Ed. You have to temper yourself a little bit because you have to be aware that you've got that extra masculine thing going on. So yeah, very interesting. Evening Mew. Right. Right, have a look. Okay. Many in Wigs, says Jam 7567. Evening Jam. Anthony says, sly move under the Succession to the Crown Act 2013, repealing and or altering the words that forbid papal nobility sitting on throne. Camilla, all contractual under the concept of legalese and non-law. Well, Camilla and Medici. Oh, yes. You might just be right there, Anthony, yes. Sean Megan. Good evening. Looks like men's hands. Looks like men's hands. Oh, are we talking about Charlie Boy? Or the Archbishop Flossie? That looks like a fella to me. Without a doubt. So I'd go with that, Sean. Has anyone heard from Pedram? I heard from him the other week on an email. Commenting under the video. They'd had a reprieve on the internet, but no. All is quiet over there, but I don't think things are going very well. It looks to me like the Afghan Pashtun are doing the job properly and starting to cause a lot of problems. And as we looked at last week, Bradford is the centre for that here on Blighty. And we already know that they've been causing that kind of hassle with the Muslim communities themselves. So we can expect a lot of this, because they've got a lot of finance, to be going on everywhere. And it's going to be coming from the Pashtun. Okay, so keep that in mind. I've also done jobs in the past for Pashtun, not knowing, of course, until we got on the job, who was working for police intelligence. It was actually, they're trying to set something up, but it didn't work. So, like, they big him up for coming over from Afghanistan because they were working with the Allied forces. They've pulled a lot over here and put them straight into police intelligence as well. So, you have to keep that in mind. We're in a much worse state than people think as far as our system goes. So no, apart from him commenting on the other video. And he says, the role of the head of the COE is to safeguard, said COE, in the absence of a true and lawful king. Clearly, this disestablishing and the mechanism all occurring under guise of colour of law. Yeah, because didn't we look through the Vatican news system, which was set up in 1929 by the fascists, Mussolini and Franco. They turned the Vatican into a sovereign state. So it was a tiny little thing instead of being a global thing. So that removed its land power. Okay. And through the IOR that we've looked at, it's pretty clear that what they intend to do is create states across the world, all subject to this Vatican state. So that's what they're doing with the takeover of the Vatican. Yeah, I think he sounded fine when he commented on there, and I'm sure he'll comment again when he has time. Mew says, Trina's received messages from Iran through WhatsApp, so internet is not affected. Okay. I wonder why he's not on them. I hope he's all right. Not from Pedram, from another. Right, okay. Yep, got you. Because Treen has relatives over there as well. My mindset in regards to Pedram, I truly hope it is the case. I think he's okay. Okay. That's good intel or interweb mute. Perhaps the power issue may be the cause of Pedram's absence. He did say on his comment on one of the other videos that it was to do with the internet. Sean says, no hide world order, yes. Smash the likes, you lurkers, says Jerry. Thanks for that, Jerry. Anthony says, well said, Sean, on the world self-accountability through self-realisation, hence not being able to change the world, but the changing and renewing of oneself as a man-mind, as in versus the Romans. Yes, and in so doing, you're no longer projecting onto the screen. You're removing power from the screen. Now, again, just interesting. I've been watching a couple of things. And I picked one up. It's the latest one on King Arthur. Well, it's more about Merlin, actually. The Pendragon Cycle, I think it's called. Oh, how clever these wizards are at changing things. Because even in that, they're putting Merlin as or Taliesin as in touch with the god of the gospel, yet they keep calling him Yeshu. Now, if you remember the other week, I showed you the difference between Yeshua and Yeshu, which is what the Jews call him. It's one's a curse and one's a liberator of his people. So even in this, they're trying to rewrite Albion's mythos. Well, not trying, they're doing it. And most people don't miss this stuff. It's clever. And I can see this gaming going on since the Vikings, the real good Vikings gig, Game of Thrones, even Last Kingdom. That all these great shows, let's be honest, are all playing into this re-scripting of Albion's history. So these Second Temple priesthood wizards are playing a very, very clever game indeed. So just keep your eyes out for that. It's all in the words. You've got to listen to what these people are saying if you're following this kind of stuff. Honestly, it's ridiculous, to be honest. Where are we? Agree with you that in effect happens when we make the change from within. Yes. Northern Thrifter says, evening, Sean, evening, Northern. Lost connection a bit then, says Jane. Drop the supplements in the show notes after Sean, yeah. Can do. Can you please decode what Sean just called them substances? Alright, I'll do it again. So you've got, because it didn't really come very well, did it on that? So you've got Tongat Ali, okay, which is quite easy to get, but then this one comes from Africa, and it's got light catching on it. Fidogia agrestis. Those I had to purchase online. And of course, like I always do, I will empty a capsule into water. And if it dissolves fine, without any globulates, you know it's pure. And both of those were pure. So, Purus Clinica, that's the name where I got it from. Pure Clinica, that's the place I got them from. Wow. If you want to just boost your testosterone levels, chaps, especially in readiness, you don't need to be shoving that white shit up your nose. So you're not feeding the game, because they're all the dealers. And you're getting proper bodily formed testosterone. And my God, does it give you a little kick. So there you go, chaps. And then put that together with a bit of Shilajit. Oof. Hey, you are in your 20s. You know what I'm saying? Right, so I hope I have decoded that for you, Ulik. Okay, imagine me even trying. Feb 4th, a very special alignment day, was it? I heard the Callus Rothschild Pendragon via that lady David I interviewed way back. I've never decided. For us to your statement, no, it's a bit. Good evening, everyone. Long time no see, says Andrew Gill. Evening, Andrew, and welcome. Right. Again, if you're recent subscribers, check your subscription because they've knocked them all off again. I've had quite a lot of new subscribers, and figures just don't move. So they're knocking you off. Okie. Right, so the United Kingdom is a state that pretends to be a nation. And we just have an image there as showing how they changed the English flag into the Union flag. And the earlier one was no diagonals. That didn't come into until they got the Irish on board. And then it became the Union Jack as we know it today. A detailed, satirical constitutional takedown of a political construct that cannot describe itself without contradicting itself. 1. Introduction. The UK's foundational confusion. The United Kingdom is not a country. It is a state. A political container made up of 4 countries, each with their own legal systems, identities and constitutional histories. Well, Northern Ireland isn't a country, is it? It's the fiefdom. Fiefed by Scottish Presbyterians, not English, Scottish. People forget this when they threw a load of Scottish Protestants on Catholic Ireland. Now, just excuse me a sec. I've picked up a bit of a cowed of one of my Oxford compadres. He knows who he is. He's a bad un for giving me this lurgy, which I've had since he come up. I don't know. Right, so I gotta just. Otherwise, it goes to the back of my throat and it makes a bloody shitty noise. Right, my apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. Right, made up of 4 countries, each with their own legal systems, identities and constitutional histories. Yet the UK insists on calling itself a nation, a country, a union, a family, and occasionally an empire, depending on the speaker's mood and the number of flags behind them. This is not a minor semantic slip. It is the root of the UK's constitutional dysfunction. A state that cannot define itself, cannot govern itself coherently. 2. The UK's constitutional structure, a patchwork held together by vibes. Unlike most every modern democracy, well, we're not a democracy anyway, we're a constitutional monarchy. The UK does not have a written constitution. No, it doesn't. Instead, it has conventions nobody agrees on, precedents nobody remembers, powers nobody can locate, and a doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty that claims to be absolute while being contradicted by its own treaties. The UK Constitution is not a document, it's a mood board. This allows Westminster to behave like a magician performing sleight of hand. The rules are whatever we say they are today. The union that isn't a union. The UK calls itself a voluntary union of nations, but behaves like a landlord with 4 tenants and only 1 set of keys. Scotland, a country with its own legal system, education system, church and international identity, treated as a region with a hobby parliament. Wales, a nation with a language older than English, correct, treated as a principality despite not being once since 1536. Northern Ireland, a constitutional minefield held together by an agreement Westminster forgets until it breaks it. England, the only part of the UK without its own parliament, because Westminster assumes it is England. The UK is structurally incapable of treating its component nations as equals, because its institutions were built on the assumption that England is the state. England, of course, is a nation with a church. Now, there I've put up that Johnny Come Lately and his boyfriend with fella's hands, as rightly pointed out, more shenanigans on this C of E. So, if you remember, we went through the entire charade of the disestablishment of the Church of England, and there is the link to that document. 4. Parliamentary sovereignty, the Crown in Parliament fiction. The UK central doctrine claims Parliament is sovereign. No Parliament can bind another. Parliament can make or unmake any law. This sounds impressive until you realise Scotland never consented to this doctrine. Northern Ireland status is conditional. Wales was annexed, not joined. International treaties limit sovereignty. Devolution contradicts absolute power. The people are nowhere in the equation. The UK's constitutional logic is a snake eating its own tail while insisting it is a lion. Oh, Judah. 5. The one nation myth. The UK government routinely refers to the state as a single nation. This is constitutionally false. A state, a nation. A nation is a country, a region, a devolved administration. The UK collapses all of these into one word, Britain, a term that excludes Northern Ireland and confuses everyone else. A nation is a body of people. It's a race of people, actually. This is why the UK cannot answer the simplest question in politics. What are you? The empire's ghost, nostalgia as governance. The UK's political identity is built on imperial afterglow. It still speaks the language of global power while struggling to manage domestic infrastructure. The empire dissolved, but the mindset didn't. Westminster still behaves as though centralisation is neutral or natural. Hierarchy is destiny. English norms are universal. Other nations are lucky to be included. This is not a union. It is an empire that forgot it had ended. Devolution, a half-built house with no blueprint. Devolution was introduced to stabilise the state, but it was built without a constitutional framework, a clear division of powers, a mechanism for dispute resolution, a definition of sovereignty, a plan for what happens if nations disagree. It is a system where powers are granted, reserved, shared or retained, depending on which minister is speaking and how annoyed they are. Devolution is not a settlement, it's a holding pattern. The UK's identity crisis. The UK is simultaneously a state, a union, a multinational entity, a single sovereign power, a collection of nations, a centralised government, a devolved system, a monarchy, a democracy, and a constitutional improvisation. It's a political Schrodinger's cat, alive, dead, and pretending to be a lion all at once. Conclusion, a confused kingdom. The UK is confused because its structure is confused. It is a state pretending to be a country governing countries as if they were counties and calling this arrangement a union. It is held together not by constitutional clarity but by habit, nostalgia and the hope that nobody notices the contradictions. A state that cannot define itself cannot reform itself. A state that cannot reform itself cannot survive unchanged. The UK's confusion is not an accident. It is the system. Of course it is. Because they want to install first Sharia law in readiness for the no-hide law because they're one and the same. And there again, we just get the structure of how this Union Jack was created. Now, the truth of the matter. And there we got Bill of Rights, which says, in the first sentence of the Bill of Rights, 1688, the people who make up the fiction of law, Parliament assembled are admitted to be the people's representatives. And it's trite agency law that the slave cannot bind its master without the master's consent. Further, the Bill of Rights 1688 states that they cannot do anything to the prejudice of the people, and all successors are bound by the same authority, as this is the document which creates the fiction of law known as Parliament assembled. Now, I've said this to you before. No longer are you, the population, the people. You are persons, or rather humans, afforded the rights of person, stamped and sealed in a birth certificate. Okay, we've gone through all this stuff. So you are not the people. So who are the people in this UK fiction? Well, I've said this before. It's got to be the fucking hoity-toits. Okay? All bastard lines, almost, of Charles II and Maria de Medici. Okay? All of them. Lennox, the lot of them. All of them. So Annie Lennox, what a slut. Are the political systems codes and statutes of the Romans, Angles and Saxons, or the Normans, the source of the laws of the people of England and their ancestors? Okay, so that's a question, by the way. A nation, just to define it. 1300, nation, a race of people, large group of people with common ancestry and language. From the Old French, nation, birth, rank, descendants, relatives. 12th century, directly from Latin, nationum, nominative, natio, birth, origin, breed, stock, kind, species, race of people, tribe. Literally, that which has been born from natus, past participle of nazi, or nasi, be born, Old Latin, gnase, nation, etymology, origin and meaning. There's a link for further study. From Latin corona or crown, originally wreath, garland, related to Greek coron, anything curved, a kind of crown, etymology, and the link comes after. From Latin coronarius, or of belonging to a wreath, presented a garland-like growth. From corona, wreath, crown, the blood vessels that supply the muscular substance of the heart and surround it like a crown, and coronary, and there's your etymology link. Corona Borealis, a northern constellation, the northern crown in which the main stars form a small but prominent arc. Borealis, Latin for northern or of the north, an aurora that occurs in the Earth's northern hemisphere. In Celtic mythology, Corona Borealis is known as Caer Arianod, or the Castle of Arianod, the place where the mythical Lady Arianod lived. Corona Borealis, the Northern Crown, stars, myths, facts, constellation guide, and there's your link. The constellation's shape has been likened, the pattern, to a circle of elders in the heavens. The ancient coronation oath doesn't mention anything about acts and statutes of Parliament, so this is the coronation oath before the Whigs formed it into parliamentary power. Okay? That's what William and Mary did. The ancient right. So now we're going to get a quote. It says, "You must accept just laws and customs shall be observed, and promise to protect them through you and to strengthen God's honour, whomever the common people choose, according to your powers." So that was part of the old coronation oath. "Concedis justis leges et consuetudines est tenedas et promitis esperti es protegendas et ad honorem de roberandus quas vulgus elegrit secundum viris tuas." Ancient coronation oath. Okay, so there it is in Latin. And I made a terrible mess of that because, of course, I'm shit at Latin. "The king is the highest rank, God according to law by which the king is made king, according to his court. Rex habet superior." We don't need to meet. Let's not make a mess of Latin. There's your Latin. Remember, this is the ancient coronation oath, okay? The Project Gutenberg ebook of the growth of the English Constitution by Edward A. Freeman, and there's your link. Is the current dismal state of affairs anything to do with the creation of the fiction of law, that is the United Kingdom, which left England without a parliament? Goddamn right it is. Is this why it has been easy for the UK monarch and or parliament to ignore or suspend the Constitution of England and the common, not English case law that limits and restrains the king and his government? Of course, case law is judge law. Okay, that's what it is. It's garbage. It's not law. It's not even English law. It's judge law. Okay? If the UK was created by acts of parliament, it is by definition a fiction of law. Then it cannot, nor could it ever have the authority to make any law. It can't. It's contract law. And then we have les fictions naissent de la loi et non la loi des fictions. Fictions arise from the law and not law from fictions. So law comes first. Maxims of law from Bouvier's 1856 Law Dictionary, The Lawful Path. And there's your link. Can Parliament legislate to grant the body politic its own authority and remove the very limits or law that it is bound by? Can the state do anything it likes? Nay, but it does. And that's because we're neither rebutting it on an individual level, and nobody has a clue what's going on because of our own ignorance. And there's your link. Magna Carta was issued in June 1215 and was the first document to put into writing the principle that the king and his government was not above the law. Magna Carta, UK Parliament. So it even comes from Parliament, they're telling you. Okay? And because we all volunteer to be in contract, of course, volunteers have no rights, do they? And there's another Parliament. There's a link to it. In the research briefing, House of Commons Library, link below, assumed that the phrase enshrined in law is code for according to statute. You see, enshrined in law means the law, not this shit. Okay. For all, there are references to the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in the oath at the coronation. The United Kingdom is itself a creation of legislation, the Acts of Union. No English, Welsh, Scottish or Irish people are recognised. But it does say, doesn't it, the people's estates. The UK must therefore be the newcomer, the interloper, a coloniser perhaps, but not native or indigenous according to law. So it's a fiction, and it's secondary to law. Interloper is a person, or aka a fiction of law, so a corporation, etc., which becomes involved in a place or situation where it is not wanted or is considered not to belong. So by that definition, the United Kingdom is an interloper. A colonizer is a person, or aka a fiction of law, not real, which settles among and establishes political control over the indigenous people of an area. Islam, Rabbinical Judaism. Okay? Colonizers. So it's not, and people go, well, you were colonized. Well, no, we actually weren't. The inner city of London was the East India Companies, which is controlled from a separate entity to England. Not so sure we can say that about Scotland, because the elites that made up Scotland were also the elites that were controlling Westminster and the inner city. Okay. So it's not too much of a stretch to come to the conclusion that the king is really only head of a state, of a secular body politic that has no native people. The peoples of the United Kingdom, as referred to, could well be those in the club. Well, I'd say absolutely they are. Only a dead entity fiction of legislation that the people of the Father of the beginnings, or our Father who art in heaven, are not in it. Nor should they want to be. Well, we've seen the shenanigans that the politicians have been doing with the names, re-registering, changing them. Boris Johnson is a corporation. Yet the very laws and customs from time immemorial that the monarch declared she will defend, preserve, maintain and strengthen, etc., are the laws and customs of the island of Albion, Bretagne, Britain, and the indigenous Britons that don't exist according to Parliament. No, you're all persons and residents and citizens and subjects. It's all in the words. Our position remains that national minority groups and other ethnic groups within the territory of the United Kingdom and its overseas territories do not fall within the scope of indigenous people. Written questions, answers, and statements, UK Parliament, and there's your link. Okay, so none of them are classed as indigenous. But neither is a person. A person is a foreigner. Yeah? Can you see how they flipped it? A person is a foreigner, you will be taxed. In English law, only foreigners can be taxed. We've been through all this time ago. The name Britain originates from the common Brythonic term Britannia, and is one of the oldest known names for Britain, an island off the northwestern coast of Europe, home of the Brythonic tribes of the Iron Age. Common Brittonic, Welsh, Brythonig, Cornish, Brythonic, Breton, Predneg, British Isles is the only ancient name for the islands to survive in general use, yes, as a geographical title, and it can be traced back to, I think, 300 and something BC. Pytheas called the islands collectively Ha Britannia, which has been translated as the Britannic Isles. Britain, we are told, is inhabited by tribes which are autochthonous, and preserving their ways of living the ancient manner of life. They use chariots, for instance, in their wars, even as tradition tells us the old Greek heroes did in the Trojan War. Of course, and if you go with Wilson and Blackett, that's because they weren't Saxons that were here. They were all Trojans. Diodorus Siculus Bibliotheca the Historia, and there's a link if you want to examine that a little bit further. We've gone through all this. I've given you all my data in my understanding of this and Troy, Second Temple, and even before that. And there you have another couple of links. Autochthonous, of an inhabitant of a place, indigenous rather than descended from migrants or colonists first originating in the place where found. There's your definition. Autochthonous. That's a strange word. I don't think I've ever come across that before. The peoples of Britain have existed for millennia, not just the 8th century, as Wiki would have readers believe. So where did they all go? Did Dewar king? It was Edward I of England, who solely was responsible for provoking the peoples of Britain into an awareness of their nationhood. Well, yeah. So did Alfred. And maybe Alfred was a Trojan and not, as they like to put us out, a Saxon. I mean, Time Team, for God's sake, how many decades have they been searching for Saxon archaeology only to never find it? And still they keep looking. It's weird, isn't it, if you think about it? And I've said Edward I for me. Good egg. British people, of course, a monarch, so he was tapped as well, but yeah, you know what I'm saying. They certainly were acknowledged to be in existence up to the mid-1600s, as referenced by Percy Enderby in his History of the Antiquity of the Illustrious Nation on the Island of Britain. Therefore, after the 3 sons of Brutus had divided the whole Isle of Britain into 3 parts, that part contained within the French seas, with the rivers of Severn, called in British Havern, Dee and Humber, fell to the eldest son Locrinus, which was after his name called Loyger, which name it hath in the British tongue to this day, but in English called England, and is augmented northward to the river Tweed. The second son, or as some say the third, Albanactus, had all the land northward from the Humber to the sea Orkney, called in the British tongue Norweirth, and the Latin Mare Caledonium. The third son, Camber, or rather the second, had for his part that remained undivided, lying with the Spanish and Irish seas, and separated from England by the rivers Severn and Dee. Part was after his name called Cambria, and the inhabitants thereof Cambrai, and their language Cambriac, and so are at this day, so that they have kept the same country and language this 2690 years and above, saith this author, when the chronicle was printed, which bears no date. Without commixtion with any other nation, especially in North Wales, first they were spoiled of their right and privileges and customs of the country, and were compelled to be judged by the laws of England. And there's a link. Now, that's not necessarily correct, because, which means this were probably earlier than the 1300s, because at the fall of the Lombardy, the the elites, a big portion of the elites in the Lombardy, came into Wales. And that's not put, you don't get that anywhere, but that is a history that's been written that very few people are aware of. So that would probably be older than the 1300s when that was put together. The modern form of the word is lager, pronounced and it has become generalised through the passage of time to become the Welsh word for England. I think I prefer England on it. As a whole, and not restricted to its original smaller extent. The word has been anglicised and Latinised into such forms as logris, legal. Is that something? A lot of L's in there. L. How does that work? Sheep shagging? Does it procure this need to? Maybe that's where it's coming from, but it's very. I would suggest it definitely got some reference to shagging of the sheep, because of course we are talking of Wales. Croeso I Lugri, welcome to England, still used on signs on the highway today. Just to remind themselves where they come from. The British Church, or English Church, existed from at least the 3rd century, so it didn't need an Act of Parliament to establish it. Well, I've said no, it was there way before that. Probably wasn't called a church, because of course they were Druids, and the Druids worshipped in the groves, specifically the Grove of Oaks. Anyway, we'll not get into that, but you know what my thoughts on that is. Legis Edwardi Confessoris, Edward 1003 to 1066. The king, not the pope, was the vicar of the highest king. The roots of the church on England go back to the time of the Roman Empire, when a Christian church came into existence in what was then the Roman province of Britain. The early Christian writers, Tertullian and Origen, mentioned the existence of a British church in the 3rd century AD, and there we have a link. Because, of course, Rome took it on right away. Right away. You know, they were playing a big part in what Yeshua did in destroying that second temple, the Persian input into the Levant for trade. And they created the first church in Rome, which is why Marcion gave them a huge donation, because he was a very wealthy guy, and then formed the first canon, based on Yeshua's gospel, using only Luke, which was the only testament based from a man not tied in any way to what we would class as Old Testament. He would not have given a donation to Rome had it not been so. Then formed his canon. There appears to be a number of inconsistencies with the accession declaration, or act and declaration, and the oath at the coronation from 1688, with their mixing and alleged matching, dipping in and out of common law and enactments, statutory legislation, e.g. Well, yes, of course. It was all about removing common law and sticking it into parliamentary authority. I've said this many times. English coronation oath, hold and keep the laws and righteous customs to observe the future laws made by the community of the realm, parliamentary realm at this point, remember. The law and ancient usage of this realm, England. This is the royal law. Nowadays, a sovereign succeeds by legislation or act of succession. A 1706 act for securing the Church of England as by law established. A session declaration oath of Act of 1910, according to the true intent of the enactments, uphold and maintain the said enactments, the Statutory Accession Declaration Act. You see? All been shifted into parliamentary. Remember what Cromwell created, demolished the office of abolished it, and created a commonwealth of parliaments. An act to alter the form of the declaration required to be made by the sovereign on accession. Schedule, it says, I, the name, do solemnly and sincerely in the presence of God profess, testify and declare that I am a faithful Protestant, and that I will, according to the true intent of the enactments with which secured the Protestant succession to the throne of my realm. Uphold and maintain the said enactments to the best of my powers according to law. There is a link. How can it be presented as being and declared to be according to an enactment or enactments of Parliament, and also claimed to be according to law? Two different jurisdictions. Parliament is the author of enactments, but whose law is being referenced and what is its source? And just to give you clarity, enactment is the process of passing legislation. You see how they mix it up? Law, statutes. It's all garbage. And lawyers are thick as pig shit. They haven't got a clue. Even fucking judges don't get it. The English coronation oath dates to the Anglo-Saxon period, but only in 1308 was it cast as a series of questions and answers. Will you grant and keep and by your oath confirm to the people of England the laws and customs granted to them by the ancient kings of England, your righteous and godly predecessors, and especially the laws, customs and privileges granted to the clergy and the people by the glorious King St. Edward, your predecessor, which were Catholic at that time? Will you keep towards God and Holy Church and to clergy and people peace and according God entirely after your power? Will you cause to be done in all your judgments equal and right justice and discretion in mercy and truth to your power? Do you grant to hold and keep the laws and righteous customs which the community of your realm shall have chosen, quas vulgus elegrit, as the people have chosen? And will you defend and strengthen them to the honour of God to the utmost of your power? Now, of course, that's when the population was the people. Well, definitely the aristocracy, of course, because they were literate. But today, there is no people outside of the elect, because, of course, you're all humans and persons. You've got the rights of the persons. In becoming a human, you've chosen to take on the benefits and privileges of personage. You've forgone all your rights as man and of the people, and you're now a human, claiming human rights. A monster. I see monster in that. Note, F.W. Maitland, Constitutional History of England, Cambridge University Press. This was Maitland's translation text from the Latin text. Now, in 1308, King Edward II was compelled to accept a recast oath, which bound the monarch to observe the future laws made by the community of the realm. Now, remember, we went through this the other week. You've got this rise of a parliament, okay, at this stage. So you've got this parliament starting to encroach upon the office of monarch. So Edward II was compelled. By whom? Nobody could compel Edward I, his daddy, to anything. But then his wife, the little French frog, was quite a bitch. But if you're following Mel Gibson, the arsewipe, then of course she was a genius. And it's all completely inverted. William Wallace was a commoner when he was bloodline. You know what I mean? It's all piss. Wind and piss, all of it. But King Edward II, so after Edward had gone the first, this is when this new parliament gig was starting to show itself and push itself on this very weak Edward II. The preamble to the Coronation Oath Act of 1689 noted that by the law and ancient usage of this realm, England, monarchs had taken a solemn oath at the coronation to maintain the laws and customs of England and its people. However, this oath was framed in doubtful words and expressions with relation to ancient laws and constitutions at this time unknown. Section 2 of the English Act of Settlement of 1701 reiterated the English coronation oath. Note, this has been repealed in New Zealand, as the oath has been amended in practice without legislative sanction. And you have to see the report of the Justice and Law Reform Committee on the Imperial Laws Application Bill 1988, pages 57 to 60 in New Zealand to see that gig. 1702, if the accession declaration oath has not already been taken by a new sovereign at their first state opening of Parliament, then it is required by law to be taken at the coronation, usually after the coronation oath. It was first included in the coronation ceremony for Queen Anne in 1702. 1714, for King George I's oath, taken at his coronation, this Kingdom of England was amended to this Kingdom of Great Britain. This change was implied rather than explicit, the kingdoms of England having ceased to exist. A 1706 Act for securing the Church of England as by law established also added the following passage. And will you maintain and preserve inviolably the settlement of the Church of England and the doctrine, worship, discipline and government thereof, as by law established within the kingdoms of England and Ireland, the Dominion of Wales and town of Berwick upon Tweed, and the territories thereunto belonging before the union of the two kingdoms. Berwick upon Tweed, what's special about that place? Nowadays, a sovereign succeeds by law immediately upon the death of another, although the ceremony remains an important event early in a new reign. The coronation oath, in which the monarchs swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms according to their respective laws and customs, is the only aspect of the ceremony which is required by law. See, it's clever what they've done. Peoples of the United Kingdom. Well, that's not you. You're persons. So who is it talking about? Well, it's got to be them that are in Privy Council, all that malarkey. The yes men and ladies. George IV acknowledged the new United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. After King Edward VII expressed opposition to taking an oath, which included language offensive to many of his subjects, it was significantly amended by the Accession Declaration Oath Act of 1910. Now, Edward VII was the proper shit. It now states that I here, his name, do solemnly and sincerely in the presence of God profess, testify and declare that I am a faithful Protestant and that I will, according to the true intent of the enactments, Parliament, which secure the Protestant succession to the throne of my realm, uphold and maintain the said enactments to the best of my powers according to law. Yeah, so it's gone from law to enactments, yet they're still talking about law, because by then you could see people had started to believe statutes were law. Only King George VI has taken the amended oath at his coronation ceremony. George V, Edward VIII, and Elizabeth II all took theirs at their first state opening of Parliament. As the state opening was not due to take place until later in 2023, Charles III was to take his accession declaration oath on the 6th of May 2023. 1937, the Archbishop now invited the King to solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of Great Britain, Ireland, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, and the Union of South Africa, of your possessions and other territories, to any of them belonging or pertaining, and of your Empire of India, according to their respective laws and customs. Note, this change was made on the authority of the Privy Council rather than via legislation, a decision with which the law officers concurred. There's your evidence. And a proclamation dated 20th of February 1937. This was problematic as the Privy Council lacked the prerogative or statutory authority to alter the 1688 Act. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was added to the standard bearers in the procession. The coronation oath is a legal obligation, although its taking is neither a prerequisite to the accession to the crown nor to provision of royal assent. While no law specifically requires a coronation to take place, the Constitution Unit, which is the bunch of Johnny-come-latelys removing us off the Constitution, has observed that the existence of the Coronation Oath Act 1688 clearly expects that there should be a coronation. In 1996, the then Prime Minister John Major said ministers would not advise Her Majesty to sign into law any provision which contradicted her oath. Note, HC Deb, 15th of October 1996, ministers had done so in the past. For example, legislation disestablishing the church in Ireland, which went against her oath. In 1953, in advance of the coronation, the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, recounted alterations since 1714 and said, quote, "If, as I am advised, the coronation oath can be lawfully administered in the terms now proposed, no useful purpose would be served by legislation." In 1953, Archbishop, "Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?" This is Floss's, Elizabeth II's gig. "Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Union of South Africa, Pakistan and Ceylon, and have your possessions and other territories to any of them belonging or pertaining according to the respective laws and customs." So obviously she said chew, yep. In 1953, the Archbishop said, "Our gracious Queen, to keep your Majesty ever mindful of the law and the gospel of God as the rule for the whole life and government of Christian princes, we present you with this book, the most valuable thing that this world affords." The moderator continued, "Here is wisdom. This is the royal law. These are the lively oracles of God." Now, of course, she did this and then stepped off that and took the chair of the estates, and then told us that she weren't giving us law, that she were giving us her heart. And that we missed. 2023, Your Majesty. So this is Charlie Boy. "The church established by law, whose settlement you will swear to maintain, is committed to the true profession of the gospel, and in so doing will seek to foster an environment in which peoples of all faiths and beliefs may live freely." Well, I don't know how that's going to sink in with the Noahide. That's a complete break from Christendom. And you can see on his orders, because he's licensing this police force, who they're letting live freely and who they're not. Don't lose sight of this. He's in Clitheroe tomorrow. I wonder if he's going to send me some shit. Let's wait and see. "The coronation oath has stood for centuries and is enshrined in law. Are you willing to take the oath? Will you solemnly promise to swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, your other realms and territories, to any of them belonging or pertaining according to the respective laws and customs?" In 2003, again with Charles, the Archbishop of Canterbury, was to ask if the King was willing to make, subscribe and declare the statutory accession declaration oath. The King was to answer, "I am willing," after which the Bishop of Bath and Wells was to hand to the King the wording of the oath on card. The King was then to repeat the oath, which is provided for in the 1910 Act, with the exception of the words "of my realm," which have been omitted after "to the throne." And then you've got House of Commons Library briefing there and a link, and the Royal Law Source of Our Freedom Today and another link. Now, just as an addendum, 1200, given or granted in unusual circumstances, exceptional, also specific, as opposed to general or common, from Old French, special, 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 particular, unusual. So we're looking at terms now and their grasp. Okay. So 12th century, modern French, special, and directly from Latin specialis, individual, particular, source also of Spanish, a special. Italian, special, from species, appearance, kind, sort, see species. The meaning marked off from others by some distinguishing quality, dear, favoured, is recorded from 1300, also from 1300 is the sense of selected for an important task, specially chosen. It is attested from mid-14th century as extraordinary, distinguished, having a distinctive character, on the notion of used for special occasions, hence excellent, precious. So, you've got special constables, haven't you? Now, if you go back to the Bible, and this is the Old Testament, God does declare a special relationship with his people. Okay? Special. The term special is very important because it is outside of any jurisdiction. It is its own creation. So, now, this just for something to keep in mind. You've got private association, let's say, private trust, private this. But private, the term itself, is actually a statutory term. Now, if you use the term special association, special trust, you're giving yourself that extra oomph and signature of the creative force and putting yourself outside of private. That's just something I'll put forward to you. So, as I've said before, I am a member of a group of us. There's 7 of us. And it's a special association, and it's called the House Society. Okay? No oaths, none of this dib or anything. We're just guys that have come together, and we pull together as and when necessary for whatever is required. Okay? And it's a special association, not a private association. So I'll just put that in the mix for you so you can just get an idea that might be a better term. From late 14th century, as individual particular characteristic, the specific meaning limited as to function, operation, or purpose is from the 14th century, but developed especially in the 19th century the sense of in addition to the usual or ordinary, as in special edition. So that's 1840. This term special is outside everything else. In logic, a class of individuals or things, from Latin species, a particular sort, kind, or type, opposed to genus. Originally, a sight, look, view, outward appearance, shape, form, a derivative of speciare, to look at, to see, behold. From pi root, spec, to observe. In English, it is attested from 1550s as appearance, outward form. In late Latin, in logic and legal language, it acquired the meaning a special case, especially as a translation of Greek eidos. A class included under a higher class, a kind, a sort, a number of individuals having common characteristics peculiar to them. The notion, as Lewis and Short puts it, is the particular thing among many to which the looks are turned. Now, when court always put in that you're making a special appearance, you see, you're not under any other jurisdiction, then you can form your jurisdiction. But, you know, things have changed now. They're really pulling down on this. Everything's just about the person. They don't care. They're not interested. But I've been going through judicial review stuff at the moment because we're putting a judicial review together. And it's been a very interesting sidetrack in relation to, let's look at just how these courts actually do work. And surprisingly, it's interesting. I'll say no more at this stage because obviously once it's put together and I fully comprehend exactly what it is that it's saying and what we're going to do, then we'll see how that pans out. Where am I? The English word is attested from the 1560s as a distinct class of something based on common characteristics. So, special association, you would think you are basing a common characteristic. You are the same mindset, same action, etc. You get what I'm saying? It's a much better term, I think, than private. The specific use in biological sciences in reference to groups of living things recognizable distinct from all others by their inherited characteristics is from the 1600s, but the exact definition never has been settled. 1610s pattern model, a sense now obsolete, from Latin specimen, indication mark, example, sign, evidence that by which a thing is known, means of knowing, from speciare, to look at, from pi root, spec, to observe. So they've specimen there, special, and special. And there endeth today's session. But, when they talk about this United Kingdom and law and all this stuff, everything you need for a comeback is in this document. Of course, I will place it under the video when we've done. So, I hope that made sense to you, and because it matters, and it matters a great deal, because there's your data. There is all the information anybody needs to know if you want to try and explain why this is a fake up, why nothing's been working, why it's because of what's gone on at parliamentary level, but more importantly, the games around the monarch and monarchs, which we know have been Rothschilds since Victoria. Anyway, that's tonight's gig. Who's joined us? We've done Who's Joined Us. Where are we? Where are you guys on? It's good to see Gary's on. Where have you been, Gary? Right, let's have a look. What have you got to say? Veracity of your statements, blah, blah, blah. Okay, Andrew Gill. Evening, Sean. Hope you're well. Evening, Andrew. I'm very well. Hope you're well. Good to see you back. Where are we there? Who are the slaves? Says Charming Anarchist. Well, if you think about it, the person, the fiction of law, is actually enslaved and completely under statute. It's also a debt instrument. And it's tied to the human. The personage, the fiction of law classed as a person, is actually the paradigm in which a human can operate. Now, it can contract, so it's not quite a slave. A slave is one who can contract. But it's very close. It's very close indeed. So not quite slaves yet, but subject to, you might say. But under Noahide, things might change extremely badly. And the same under Sharia, because of course they made it clear, they when they get brave and they've got their numbers, they'll offer you to convert. You say, no, thank you. Then they say, well, we're going to tax you. If you claim you don't want to pay tax, then they do war against you and enslave your females. They kill the males and enslave all the females and the kids. Because, of course, they suppress their females so bad that they're not even functioning properly as a female. But those who have been brought up in the West see our girls as free to be who they are. They want that. They lust after it. But because they've demolished the sacred feminine in their females, means they've also destroyed the sacred masculine in themselves. And so the only way they can give thought forms to our females is we want to enslave them and rape them. That's how broken a follower of the book is. It's not good for them. They're not in a good place. And this is why they look to their enemies, you might say, the females, as they have to enslave them so that they can carry out their lusts and all their fantasies, but not on their wife, because the wife is just so far away from being sexual. It just doesn't wash. But they can project their fantasies onto our ladies. And this is the problem. This is psychology at work. It's not blasphemy. It's not being I'm not being offensive. But when you've studied psychology, even though it breaks things, this is exactly how they would describe the position of, especially the ones that have been born here, in the way that they look at our ladies, our girls. Because then the way that they deceive themselves is they're filthy. They deserve it because they dress different. Never giving thought to the fact you've been a guest in this country to see if you can raise yourself to the point of offering freedom to your family, to your wife, rather than thinking the only way you can keep your family together is to subjugate. That's what happens when a lower class of mindset enters a higher class And unfortunately, we've lowered ourselves. Well, I'm not saying we, because I haven't. But our culture's lowered itself almost to that degree, to the point where our women think they want to be black. And they're having Jewish foreskins and Muslim foreskins from circumcision injected into their lips. Abortions on the rise here as well. 66 million death abortions in America last year. That's bigger than any war, ladies and gentlemen. They're getting the death count. You know, there's do sin to bring in the Messiah. It's not necessarily that they're doing sin, they're getting you to do it. You know what I'm saying? It's honestly, it's beyond comprehension, half of this. Nice to see you, Gary. But the Union Jack is the same as the British East India Company. Not originally, but I can't remember now offhand. I have gone through this. We have shown its ensign. See, they're ensigns on naval ships. They're not necessarily flags. It's a different thing. Slaves, what we call ourselves, inmates. Yeah. I thought you were a nation of pirates for the corporations, says Gary. I'll not argue with that. Right, okay. Didn't the British government absorb the British East India Company, the biggest navy at the time? No. The East India Company took over completely and subverted the government and then used it as its front. So when India got independence, that were after the secret societies or the East India Intelligence Service had created its own governmental structure in India and then feigned independence from the government. But of course, the East India and its intelligence operations had full control of India. And that's the same in every nation that's been feigned an independence. Secret societies where the power is, ladies and gentlemen. It's the network of intelligence for these East India conglomerates. That's what it is. Didn't the Dutch East India Company take over England? Yes, absolutely it did, yeah. And even to this day, the Dutch royal family are higher in the pecking order than the Windsors. And you can see that in the relationship between Prince Bernhard, when he was alive, and Prince Philip. Philip was subordinate to Yon Mum. And that is a fact. But of course, Philip not having sired any of the offspring, were just there for the show. You could say it was a beard, really, which is the term they use for pretend wives, like Stormer's pretend wife. He's as bent as it come, you know. He's a bumshagger, and that's it. That's just a beard when you see him. If you'll see him kissing her, it's not a kiss. He's like disgusted at the idea. Where are we? First American flag looks like the East India Company flag. This is oak tree. Well, it was an amalgamation of 13 states, remember, and they opposed British rule. But the Americans did a lot of bad stuff too. You know, they were trying to invade Canada. It's an interesting study, is the Native American stuff, because the Dutch East India Company was a big creator of a lot of violence amongst the Native Americans because they armed the Iroquois, who were a bad lot anyway. But when they started to... When the Americans had created a power of their own, they started to act no different than the imperialists. And they were trying to take over Canada, which meant they were taking over the Native Americans in Canada, because it was mainly a Native American country at that time. And this is why a lot of Native American tribes sided with the English. And even the French. But it's I mean, I did study all that years ago. But honestly... an interesting thing. And The Last of the Mohican, the film, is in that time. It's an interesting sort of... but it mainly fixates upon the battle between the English and the French. yeah, it's... And then you've got the Mohicans, yeah, which were, if you go with Wilson and Blackett, were the breeding of the Arthurian Arthur and the Native Americans. So they created a sort of interbred mix. And the Mohicans were that... Well, the Iroquois wiped them out. Completely wiped them off the face of the earth. And this is direct result of being armed by the Dutch East India. And the Dutch East India, remember, at the time, was run by the Venetians, who had left Venice before Napoleon could sack it. Made home in Amsterdam and then moved over to the inner city. It's so... History's just so interesting. It really is. I used to love it. City of London, Astana, says Mew, yep. New Amsterdam, New York. York Rite, actually, New York, my friend. It's based on the New York Rite. It's just Freemasonry. Rome created City of London circa 43 AD, way before Venice. Well, yeah. The Venetians took over the inner city of London. Frank O'Brien says approximately 47 AD, walls completed. I take it that's Londinium. But before that, it was Londonwick. Before Londinium, which was the Roman term, it was Londonvic, which was the Saxons. And it was a Saxon base for human trafficking. Before that, Ker Troia, which was Brutus's claim. But thanks for that addition, Frank. 43 AD, invasion of Britain, occupied till 410 AD, infamous letter. Look to your own defences. Now, you see, there's so much to be known about that. It's a lot more. I have a letter to Caesar on my website, which I'll put up, showing that they were Trojans all. Caesar, the lot. They were all of the same stock. And I've noticed a lot of obscure stuff coming up now about origin of Rome and all this kind of stuff, which I'm not comfortable with, but obviously I'd have to give it a bit more of a study to make a determined sort of determination. But everything just seems to be being undermined again, all mythos, especially Albion's mythos. But yeah, I mean, London Vic Fost, Saxons, definitely, and it was a human trafficking slavery gig. Hewlett says, Berwick-upon-Tweed, a town that changed country 14 times. Oh, okay, it's one of them, is it? Anor Zian, forgive me, I'm referring to empires and corporations rather than physical places. No problem there, welcome. Frank says, we are British, not English, nor UK. Not sure I'd class myself as British because of its connotations today, but you get your point. I get your point there. City of London remains undefeated. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely undefeated. It can only defeat itself by moving. And we've done a full piece, and it's on the website, about how it looks like the City of London is actually moving to Astana in Kazakhstan. The ship has sailed, as I would term it. Anorex, Prince William will be more English than most previous monarchs. Will he, though? I mean, we've gone through this. From my perspective, William is the offspring of Jacob Rothschild, seen in the long head. Whereas Charles, if you look at Evelyn de Rothschild, from the nose up, is the spitting image of Charles. So, I don't think so. I mean, even Diana is not English. Spencer Churchill's, no. Goldstein, all that's involved with Diana. So I know he won't be English at all. And there's also data to suggest that once Diana had been murdered, if she were, they changed the kids as well. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know. Frank says, Temple Boy London, a laudable land of Swiss Templars. Is it Swiss Templars? Now, I know Sean Ross would have us say yes. We do know that Switzerland was built by Templars because that's where they had to escape to. But there's two kinds of Templars. There's the Solomon Templars that built Scotland, and the Christian Templars from England, from France, Germany, etc. The Solomons have a square temple. The English Christians built the inner city temple church, which is not square or not rectangular. It's round, and it was dedicated to Mary, the mother of Jesus. The temple in Scotland is Solomon's temple. So there's two branches of masonry, and in my opinion, when the Templars were disbanded and sought after, it was the Solomon Templars getting rid of the Christian Templars. I've done a lot of live streams on this stuff in the past, maybe a few years ago. So Swiss Templars, I don't know. How similar he looks to King Carlos. Well, that has been presented, but if they did change the kids, and if you do, I have looked at it in depth at this, the kids, and there was a big change. Now, we do know we can all change, as we grow, but there was a change between the William with Diana and the William after Diana. And look at his head. It's the longest fucking head you've ever seen. Well, who else has one of them? Jacob Rothschild. So maybe we've given you a bit of information you can have a look at there. Interesting. Diana's mother, Arosh, a Swiss family. Quite perhaps, but there's a bigger mix with Diana. I think Diana still has also a connection to Charles II's bastard lines, if I remember rightly. But I get you, but you've just got to be careful. We don't just jump off onto Sean Ross's absolutism. The guy's a good guy, he's a clever guy, don't get me wrong, he's been through a lot of shit, but he hasn't balanced himself out because he still suggests that everybody in Switzerland is playing the game. Like, foreigners think everybody on England is batting for the inner city of London. Everybody in Italy is batting for the Rome. Everybody in America is batting for Washington. That's not the way the world works. All our nations are governed by one group of people, and we take the fucking rap for it. We pay for it, and we take the rap. We energize it, and we take the fucking rap for it. So, okay. But thanks, Frank, for your input. Much appreciated. Paul says, like father, like son. Gary says he looks like a Rothschild too. So William possibly 3 fathers. Greedy bastard. Frank says, after wedding, they stayed King Carlos to period. And there's images of him, Charles being there. Now, this is what I'm trying to say. It is very possible that the original William was, in fact, because he did look like him. I accept that. And it also looks like King Carlos's son, who's now the king. And the fact that Carlos at the time was the king of Jerusalem. Now, they're putting William up and starting him up big. He would have to be very in tune with the king of Jerusalem for this no-hide system to kick in. But I do not believe, or let's say accept at this stage, that William that we know today is the William that was the child that we saw with Diana. They are so different facially. Now, this Longhead could have been sired by Jacob Rothschild with Diana, which gives us that similarity. But as he's got older, that Longhead has come through. And if you know anything about the Longhead skulls, it gives you more data to support that fact. But the original William, if this is correct, and as I said, it's if, we're not making statements of fact, he was very, very more in tune with Diana, how Diana would look mated with King Carlos. So I agree completely. Well, again, Sir James Goldsmith, looking very likely. She looks just like his daughters. Yeah, absolutely. Anthony de Moors, prima nocta. Yeah, absolutely. which is what they gained when they bankrolled the royal families before Napoleon was defeated. You would naturally want breeding rights, which means all the royal families across Europe from Victoria were all sired by the Rothschilds. How else could they have taken over the entire European monarchy system but by blood? I'm your daddy, you'll do what I'll tell you. And you've seen the image of Evelyn on Charles. You don't get to do that. But if you're his daddy, you get to do that. And remember, Charles was terrified of his father. We all thought that with Philip. You know? So, yeah. They're all inbred, says Gary. Well, Ross is red. Rothschild is red shield. So it's shielding the red. The blood. Yeah, that's where that comes from. First dibs on the bride, some say. Prima nocte. First dibs, ancient custom. Yep. Was her daddy? Yeah, we've done that, sorry. Sloppy seconds. They breed via the female line always. Yes, they do, because the rabbinical Judaic line that they claim and covet is passed only through the female, which is in direct opposition, is it not, to the creation. Father, mother, offspring. So they invert that, which is what we looked at before as well with the estate of the mother. Why the mother isn't classed as a citizen on the birthing records, but the father is. So the mother's not subject. And this is what we believe the Vatican, how it holds the estates, because on the inversion of putting mother first before father. So we've looked at all this stuff, Frank, if you've not been on it before and thinking, we've gone into great detail about this kind of stuff. So I'm not just pulling off the wind and piss here. What I'm speaking about, we've delved into in great detail in past live streams. What do you think of the term special presentment? Special presentment. Well, it's the word special that's really important. Whatever comes after, whatever's conjoined with it, would then be taking on sort of like the meaning of special, Anthony, I would say. Anthony Demore says, that'll be secundae negligentes. I see the Rothschild ball is coming up. Is it indeed? Great stuff, Sean. Nail on head with Edward the First turning. Thanks for that, Frank. It's good to see you on, and I'm glad you've been some good information there. We just have to be careful we don't just follow everything that Greg says. However, and this has been told to me by a few people who met the original Greg Hallett, who wrote the original books, and this has been said to me by too many people, and also his Scottish compadre George Lees has been claiming this forever, that the Greg we've known for quite a long time is not the original Greg who wrote those books. In which case, we could then say what Greg formed in them books is real, but now we've got this lunatic running around wanting to be the king of the fucking UK. Which is why I've presented this tonight. It's important. You know, how can you be the king of the UK without understanding the fact you're not interested in being king of a sovereign nation? You just want everybody to agree to you taking up the kingship of a state. Very in sync. You know, stateless monarchs, kingdomless monarchs. Yeah? This is the game that they're playing. And so it all works and makes sense to me, this stuff. Britain defined as a landmass, as was Albion before. Yes, absolutely. Well, I found 3-something BC, geographically, they were called the British Isles. And Albion was specifically, well, it was the British Isles, but the British Isles included the islands all around, Orkney, Shetland, etc. And in some cases, I've seen maps to suggest Iceland also, but I don't know. Handmaid's Tale, says Mew, yeah. Yeah. Britons rather than British, yeah. Laudio gifted by Henry II to them before they created Swiss 1st of August 1291. Charter title remains the same. Thanks, Frank. Sean, I meant the US Grand Union or Congress flag, 1775, 1777. Looks like East India Company flag, not the Native Americans. Thanks for that. Oak tree. Okay, thanks for all the comments in the chat. Thanks, Sean, for attending. Wise sound. Good night, everyone. Blah, blah, blah. Yep. Right, well, I'll say the same. Thanks very much for joining. Nice to see some newbies on commenting, and you brought some great information on there. And thank you for that. I hope you have a great week. Thanks for taking part. Mods, thanks for modding. And as always, I shall say, till the next time.
electronic engineering,